Yo fam, and welcome back to the Legacy Podcast, where today we are talking to Dr. Jon Chasteen, a good friend and mentor of mine who is the senior pastor at Victory Church in Oklahoma City and the president of the King's University in Southlake, Texas. Stay tuned right now as we're talking about how you get plugged into your destiny. Hey, it's your favorite time of week again, once again with the Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, your winning coach, Kinsley Jordan, as we encourage you each and every week to crush your goals, ignite your dreams, and forge a legacy in your life. And I say this, I promise I think I say this every week, but I am so excited about our next guest this week on the Legacy Podcast. You know, most of the time, I don't read through the entire bio when we have amazing guests, but listen, this is absolutely worth it. We have not only Dr. Jon Chasteen, but also Senior Pastor Jon Chasteen and President of King's University, Jon Chasteen. Now, not only is he a doctor, which we're going to get into, but also the lead pastor at Victory Church in Oklahoma City, and then was asked where he's serving right now is the president of King's University down at Dallas. I mean, it's phenomenal because not only as our experience in the past, I had the opportunity to work for him, an amazing boss, an amazing environment, an amazing culture that he sets, but it's that passionate desire about empowering and equipping the local church through the preparation of Christ-like servant leaders that Dr. Chasteen desires to lead TKU's facility and administration with the transparency and authenticity. And I can tell you that that's exactly what I experienced. I had the chance to work with him at Victory Church at the Edmond campus. So Pastor, Dr., President Jon Chasteen, welcome, awesome, to the Legacy Podcast. How many, the only thing we're missing is governor or bishop.
You need to just call me John. It feels weird, Kinsley, calling me doctor.
Okay, doctor, whatever you say. That's awesome.
It's good to be on, man. Thanks for having me.
Dude, so glad to have you. So for our viewers, you know that we dive into and we want to be able to bring transparency and honestly the walks through, you know, a lot of us, God has placed passions in our lives and gifts in our lives. And so many times, John, we can get talked out of the passion and the fire and the gift that God has given us because we look at the road that it'll take to get there and say, dude, it's too hard. I'm just going to stick with what normal is. And amidst COVID-19, I think not only have people learned a new normal, but honestly, I think it's really challenged us to reevaluate our ability to look and say, you know what, I need to go after my goals. I don't need to be afraid of it. I need to charge into it. So I want to start with you. If you rewound the clock back to 25-year-old John, is this where you said you would be? Is this what the roadmap looked like?
No, not even close. No, I think the path that God took me on as many times the same path He takes many people on is it doesn't make sense in forward. It only makes sense in reverse.
Yeah.
When you're 15 years down the road and you look back and you're like, oh God, that's what you were doing. Okay, yeah. I understand now. It's like that wilderness journey. You don't really know what God's doing until you walk it out.
Yeah.
So that's the story of my life for sure. Yeah.
So what did you get started in ministry first, or was that a calling you felt later? Did you start off in school? Like what led you to, I guess let's step back. How did you get to the place where you were full-time ministry at Victory in Oklahoma City, where I met you?
Yeah. So, I stumbled into God's call in my life, so to speak. When I graduated college, I wanted to be a college basketball coach. I played college basketball and then I went and got a master's degree in education because somebody had told me that you need a master's degree to be a college coach. I don't even know if that was true, but I did it because I thought that's what it took. So I got a master's degree, and then got in a relationship where I was helping be an assistant coach at a university and had a master's degree in education. I realized pretty quick I don't want to be a coach. You don't get paid much, and you work like 80 hours a week. This is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So I got a call from the university that said, hey, we have an opening. I was probably, that was 2004. So I'd have been 24, 25.
Yeah.
Just had a crazy opportunity to step into a leadership role at a university as a vice president at the age of 25, which is unheard of. And so just through a relationship. So I was in higher education and I fell in love with higher ed. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I want to be a college president. This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I started getting a doctorate degree. I started my doctorate degree, and I was just attending Victory Church. I was a greeter. I just sat in the back and attended church like everybody else.
And what university was that? So
this was Southwestern Christian.
So Southwestern Christian, you were there on staff, and what was your role there at 25?
So I was the vice president for university advancement. So I was doing fundraising. So I was, raising money with alumni and building relationships. So, I did that for 7 years or so. And then in my early 30s, the Victory Church, I knew some of the leadership there, and they came to me and they said, "Hey, we're launching a new campus in Edmond, and we would like for you to be the Edmond campus pastor."
Yeah.
And I was like, "I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm not interested." And so
nope, not interested. That's funny.
I was a preacher's kid growing up, so I didn't want to be a pastor. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That was the worst idea on the planet. So I declined. Series of conversations that kept coming back to me. "Hey, we know you said no, but every time and this is what I mean about God, if you miss it the first time, we serve a God who's gracious enough, like he did Jonah, to come back a second time."
Amen.
So, and so they came back and said, "Listen, every time we pray about this, you're on our heart. Will you at least pray about it?" And so I'm thinking, oh, what a novel idea. I should probably pray about it. So to make a very long story short, in 2011, I looked at my wife and I said, "Call me crazy." I was getting close to finishing my doctorate degree, but I wasn't done yet.
Yeah.
Call me crazy, but I think God's telling me to do this. And she agreed. So I just took a plunge and became a campus pastor. And that's kind of where our paths crossed.
Yeah.
Okay, what year was that you?
Dude,
it was 12 or 13, maybe.
12 or 13, something like that. I think it. Yeah. I think 12 or 13.
I just remember thinking, dude, you're a pilot. You're my hero. I just wanted to go to work with you and see what you did. Oh my
gosh, whatever. That's amazing. So you found yourself. So when you were initially, when they said, "Hey, will you at least think about this? Will you pray about this?" Was it one of those moments where you're like, "I don't want to pray about this because I don't want to do this because this is not what I planned on doing"?
I didn't want to do it at all. And in fact, if my wife knew I was going to become a pastor, she'd have never married me. Like she didn't want to be a pastor's wife.
Yeah.
And so we prayed about it. We committed to pray about it for 2 weeks. Came back to my wife and I said, "Babe, you're going to think I'm crazy." And this is the way I felt. And I don't know if anybody out there has felt this way, but my head was telling me you're crazy.
Yeah.
And my heart was saying, this is it.
Yeah.
And so I think we always face that choice where we're going to listen to our emotions and feelings, or we're going to listen to the Spirit.
Oh yeah.
That many times comes as this, what you might refer to as a gut feeling.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it felt like. It's like, I don't understand this. I don't understand exactly what this is going to look like, but I know that I know. And then when my wife said, "You're right," I was like, oh my gosh, so it's obviously God. If Michelle is wanting to go into the ministry, this is God. So we just took a plunge. We just went for it.
That
amazing. That was in 2011.
Wow. So you'd been there, I think, probably just a year or maybe a year and a half at that point when I'd met you.
Okay. That's about right.
When you talk about that moment, that gut feeling, I've heard people say, you'll know in your knower. You'll know. And the thing that I guess gets me and made me realize that I knew God was talking to me is as the word talks about the peace that surpasses all understanding, that it doesn't make logical sense. When you look at the situation, you're like, what in the world? Like, how in the world am I okay with this? How am I okay with this taking place? How am I okay with this total change in direction? But it's that peace of knowing this is exactly what I'm supposed to do.
Well, I love that verse because it says it passes understanding.
Yeah.
It surpasses.
Surpasses, yeah.
So if you have that gut check, in your knower, usually it's not a very comforting thought.
Yeah.
It's not very comfortable. It's in fact, if it's comfortable, it may not be God,
Yeah.
It's going to stretch you a little bit, and it did. It certainly did. I'd never held a microphone. I'd never stood on a stage. I'd never done any of those things. And so it was a big stretch for me.
Yeah. So when you dove into that and you said, okay, so you're going to be a campus pastor for the Edmond campus, what, when you step into that, one, you've been praying about it, you've taken this plunge and you said, okay, like I'm trusting you to do this. What were those thoughts, or what was that process of walking through and being like, dude, am I going to be able to do this? Like how are people trusting me right now? I was a VP of, as you said, why are they going to trust me? There's no way this is going to work. Kind of those mental thoughts of going through. What was that? How did you work through that?
Yeah, I think it was. We're always stretched in some way in our faith, and I don't know about you, but I've always found that anytime I start getting comfortable, I probably should prepare for a change
Yeah.
because I don't think God wants us to be comfortable. I think He's always in this process of making us what I refer to a lot of times as uncomfortably comfortable.
Yeah.
And I think I've just come to terms with being comfortable, being uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and knowing that. And I think that's kind of the point, right? Like when we're out kicking our punt coverage, so to speak, we have to rely on God. Like if
Yeah.
we're in over our head, people say God will never put more on you than you can bear. Yes, He will. Every time He will. He'll always put. That verse says He won't tempt you more than you can bear. It's not
Yeah.
even a Bible verse. He will always give you more than you can bear, because when He gives you more than you can bear, it means you need help bearing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for me, it's always been I've just and that was becoming a VP at a university when I was 24 or 25, sitting around a table of all 60-year-old people on the leadership team. I had to figure out real quick, God's putting me in these positions because there's no way I could manipulate these positions.
Yeah.
And so if God put me there, I should, not in an arrogant way, but I should confidently, because of the power of Christ that's within me, I have a seat at the table, and God
Yeah.
put me here. And if He didn't want me here, I wouldn't be here. So you just kind of walk in that confidence. It's not arrogance. It's a meekness. It's a bold, it's a humble confidence,
Yeah.
And I think we should all walk that out in whatever realm we're in.
So that's really interesting you say that, because I think a lot of times in the last several years, I've dealt a lot in the innovation realm and the entrepreneurship realm of dealing with not just companies that are bringing technology online, but frankly, like these game-changing mindsets where people start convincing themselves. It's like this toxic mentality where you start defeating yourself before you've even given yourself a chance. Like you start talking yourself down, if I'm not smart enough, and who am I to be in this meeting? And I've even found myself at times sitting in meetings where I'm like, what am I doing on this phone call? Like, why am I on this call? They've clearly made a mistake. How in the world am I having any input in this situation? But there's something so important about being able to talk yourself through that and say, listen, like I'm here for a reason. God doesn't make mistakes. I'm in this meeting for a reason and a purpose. So as you not only took the campus pastor, but then there was the transition of you to the senior pastor role in Victory. And one of the things I was talking to your personal assistant about was, people don't realize the weight of transitions for leaders. They may think, well, the congregation, everybody is going through a transition, but they don't realize the sheer weight and the pressure in the natural that is on you as an individual when people go through these transitions, or when a company goes into a merger, or when you move into a new role. Talk us through that process of saying, oh my gosh, like I am now not just a campus pastor, like I'm responsible of leading an entire congregation as a thriving congregation of.
Yeah. So, right when I started getting comfortable with the whole campus pastor thing,
Yeah.
Again, comfort is not in God's,
Yeah.
vocabulary.
Yeah.
In 2014, the lead pastor of that church, a great man of God, still is a great man of God, but just
Yeah.
made a really bad mistake
Uh-huh.
and had a moral failure. And again, I wasn't even really the guy up, to bat. Here's a guy who's never really preached a whole lot. I'd preached a little bit by that point, but not a lot.
Yeah.
And just circumstances happen one thing after another, and all of a sudden John's the guy. And I was just as surprised as anybody else. I was like, me? Really? Are you sure? Like, you don't want to put it out there a little bit and see if there's anybody out there better than me?
Here, let me help you look for somebody. We'll go through the interview process together.
I felt called. I can take you to the very place and the very song that was playing when God put it on my heart. Yes, you're going to do this. And it was, it's kind of cheesy now, but that song that was huge back then called Oceans, it had just come out.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm going to take you beyond the borders, I'm going to take you out into the depths of the ocean where I need you to get offshore and I'm going to take care of you. You're not going to drown.
Yeah.
And so it was a confirmation for me, but it was really hard times. It was there was loss of trust. The church was hurting. I was a new leader, had never done this before. So I'm trying to navigate two different waters, leading a team that's hurt, pastoring a congregation that's hurt, and trying to figure out how to be a senior pastor at the same time. So those were difficult times for sure.
Oh my gosh.
Like, some people think there's two different ways to learn how to swim. One, you go down to the shallow end and wade your way in and somebody holds you up and kick around, or somebody just throws you in the deep end. You either sink or swim. That was kind of me into the ministry. Just, I'm going to throw you in the deep end and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, that's any one of those challenges, any one of those, being a senior pastor, walking a congregation through her, walking a staff through her, any one of those is like a life challenge for most people. And you had all three at one moment of being new in all of that. When you look at that, when you look back and say, what, oh my gosh, like, how am I walking through this process? What was that day to day? Like when you saw this challenge, because inevitably, our viewers, if you're watching for the first time, or if you've been a viewer and a listener for a long time, listen, there's going to be challenges. Even the Word of God says this, there's going to be challenges. It's not if, it's a matter of, it's going to happen, but take heart, as the Word says, I've overcome the world. It's one thing to say that, it's another thing to live that when you're in the deep end of the deep pool and you're like, Lord, what is going on? That process, like, what is that? What was that process for you? Or did you find yourself at the end of days saying, dude, I don't know if I can do this?
100%. I mean, I'd cry a lot of times I would end the day crying. And it's just, like you said, it's a daily, I think if you try to zoom out too much, it'll overwhelm you.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't have to worry about today. The Bible's very, very, explicit on that. I don't worry about tomorrow. I worry about today. Tomorrow has enough troubles of its own. And so it's that day-to-day walk, and there's a spiritual side to it. If your tank is empty spiritually, emotionally, mentally, it's going to wear you down. But God really gave me mentors, man, just miraculous mentors. He gave me Jimmy Evans, who I have two pastors, Jimmy Evans and Craig Rochelle.
Yeah.
And that was the time I met them for the first time. And they just came around me and helped me through it. So it took supernatural and natural. I needed the supernatural. I needed to pray. I needed to be in the Word. But I also just needed some practical guidance and wisdom to help me through that. And it may help some of the listeners. I prayed two prayers, and I don't pray them as much now, but there are many times that I do. During that season, my wife and I prayed two prayers every single night that got me through so much, because I wanted to sleep at night. I knew sleep was important. I didn't want to stay up all night stressing out about finances and everything else.
Yeah.
I prayed, the first prayer I would pray every night was, God, this is your problem, not mine. And
that's good.
And I don't mean that in a mean way to God. What I'm saying is, God, you put me here.
Yeah.
You love this church more than I do. You love these people more than I do. And so this is your problem. And I would say, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go to sleep. And if you need me, wake me up. I'm happy to, if you need me for anything, but I'm just going to believe that while I'm sleeping, you're working while I'm sleeping. And then the second thing I would pray, is that this was a really important one for me, and it's still a prayer for me in leadership, is if there's somebody better fit to lead than me, then I submit my resignation and I'm willing to do something more difficult. And for me, that purified my heart to say, I'm not doing this for the glitz and the glamour and the power. If there's somebody else that can do this better than me, then I hold it with an open hand. This church doesn't belong to me. This university doesn't belong to me. And that every night I could feel this tangible weight just come off my shoulders.
Yeah.
And I would just drift off to sleep every night, no stress. And then I'd pick it back up the next morning, pick up the burden and keep going.
Wow. You said two things there that those things inside themselves could literally be a podcast episode themselves. One was mentors. You had these two mentors, and it was awesome that, this is truly the body of Christ. A lot of times when you look at churches, secularly, when you look at a church, you say, oh, it's all competition. But the reality is it's one kingdom, and you had two mentors that you meeting for the first time come rally around you, saying, hey, we're here for you. We're gonna hold you up. We're gonna encourage you, and we're gonna give you some wisdom and guidance and walk through this with you. And it's something that I think a lot of times, and I see this all the time, especially when you're just talking to people, is that it's like the art of mentorship is gone. That in the social media area, the area where everybody's trying to, I'm not going to project what people are trying to do, but in the social media area where people's lives are so available, it's almost like it seems like there's a mentality of saying, I got this. When in reality, if you look at like real leaders like you and other people in your life, Craig Rochelle and Jimmy Evans, like you're talking about, and some of these other just men of God and mentors of the industry, they're constantly pulling people in and say, hey, I need you. Like, I need you to hold me accountable. I need you to speak into my life. Why is that so important? Because I would venture there is there are very few people that on their own willingly are saying, I'm looking for a mentor. Will you be that for me? Will you mentor me? And what does that mean? What does that mean to be a mentor? Why is that so important?
Yeah, it's a disciple, so to speak. It's and you've heard this said before, but if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're not going anywhere. And so the best leaders I know, the best leaders I know are surrounded by people smarter than they are.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
both at the university and at the church, I am
yeah,
surrounded by brilliant people who I'm not threatened by, I'm not insecure of.
yeah.
I empower them. I'm their biggest cheerleaders. And so, yeah, when I'm around like Craig Rochelle, for example, he's asking me more questions than I'm asking him. And I'm thinking, Craig, shut up. I want to ask you questions. Like, I don't know anything. Stop asking me questions. I want to ask you. But it really just shows the heart of a true leader. A true leader is always learning. We're not insecure. We're not trying to name drop. We're not trying to stick my chest out and be the biggest personality and biggest voice in the room.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best thing a leader can do is shut up and listen to somebody else.
So true. So true. There's real quick before we move on to that next point. Why is it so important for individuals to say, I need a mentor in their life? Because we did some leadership training, and one of the points I found myself shocked and speechless after we were doing this leadership training. I said, listen, our primary responsibility is to be first, we have to be willing to be a mentor. And afterwards, after we did this leadership session, people said, I don't know how to be a mentor. And I was taken back. I was like, wait a minute, what am I talking about? Maybe we should have started there first. And then my follow-on question was, have you ever had a mentor? Have you ever had somebody who said, I'm invested in you. I'm not leaving you. I'm not ditching you on the side of the road. I'm invested in you. Two people out of 40 had said, yes, I've had a mentor in my life that intentionally set me down. 2 people. And I'm not saying that's a statistical cross section, but 2 people out of 40 have said, yes, I've had an intentional mentor and they've changed my life. Why, from your perspective, is that so important to find a person who will disciple you, who will mentor you in your life, that will invest?
I would say first is because you're not that smart. Whoever it is that I'm going to
join the not smart club.
Yeah. Whoever I'm going to look at in the eye and say you need a mentor.
Yeah.
The whole reason I would say you need a mentor is because wherever God's taking you, you can't do it by yourself. That's why Moses, Moses was this guy who was doing everything, and all of a sudden he comes down and his father-in-law says, dude, what are you doing? You're going to kill yourself. You can't do this by yourself.
Yeah.
And nobody was meant to do anything by themselves. That's not God's design. And so I think it's, there's so many layers in there for mentorship. And I get asked all the time, will you be my mentor? Or how do I find a mentor? I had a pastor call me the other day, said, I don't have any mentors. I have one guy that I want to be my mentor. How do I ask him to be my mentor? And I said, don't ask him to be your mentor.
Yeah.
If there's one way that you want to scare somebody off, you need to, let's say somebody needs a mentor, they come to Kinsley, they want Kinsley to mentor them. The sure way to scare Kinsley off is to just walk up to him and say, hey, will you be my mentor? Because it's such I don't know what you mean by that. Like, what does that mean to you? Yeah. And so my advice to him and anybody listening would be, and I didn't, like for Craig Rochelle, for example, we just had a conversation one time and then another one. And then I would say, hey, can I have 10 minutes of your time? And I would just make notes and notes and notes. I'd come with 5 questions. He would answer them. I'd say, I don't want to take any more of your time. I was respectful. I was honoring of his time. Slowly but surely it matured. And then one day, I remember it so clearly, I was about to walk up on stage at my church to preach. And I texted Craig, it was on a Sunday morning, and I said, Craig, is it okay if I begin referring to you as my pastor? So we had this year of relationship building. Yeah. If I'd have walked up to Craig Rochelle the first day and said, hey, will you be my pastor? He would have been like, who, what? Are you crazy? So let it happen organically, You don't have to, it's not like there's a contract. You don't have to have somebody agree to be your mentor. Just say, hey, can I get 10 minutes of your time? Can I take you to coffee? Can I ask you 10 questions? Yeah. And let the relationship happen organically. And before you know it, you have a mentor. And they didn't have the title yet, but you had one all along, and you didn't realize it.
That process is is so symbiotic to the process of a lot of times people think, oh my gosh, if I'm going to succeed, I've got to succeed right now. And they're not okay with it taking a while. And they're not okay with it. I've seen this not only as a worship pastor, but also as a leader in multiple different facets, that you have some people that are very gung-ho, but they don't want that. I don't want to even say success, but they don't want that next level of development to take a year. And there's a level of maturity it takes to be able to say, you know what, like, I don't care about what that next level is. I care about learning as much as I can and just absorb about the process. So many times we get focused on the results, but the real victory of the whole thing is the process of getting there. And I would say, I think a lot of times we find more value in the process than we do the title, which is so amazing. I mean, I think it's so awesome with the titles that you have, that you hold. Just knowing your past, you're so team-minded, you're so development-minded that you care more about the team that rests in the development of what those positions hold. You care more about the team and the value that's what's there. So how in the process, before we go to break, one more question, and then we'll come back and really dive into what lessons that you would give yourself if you could look back. But in that process, what would you say to people who, maybe they don't have a team to be able to support them? Maybe they don't have a mentor or a leader, and they feel like, I got this dream, I got this passion that God has given me, this gift that He's given me. I just don't know where to go. Like, I don't know how to pull myself up out of this rut that I'm in.
Yeah, I think you're so right that many times we want to try to rush stuff, and we have the way that we want to do it, or the way that we perceive God is going to do it.
Yeah.
And then there's the way that God's actually going to do it. And I mean, a perfect example of this is the children of Israel. All of a sudden, their Savior comes to them. They've been in slavery. Moses leads them out. And right as he leads them out, it says they take a step outside of Egypt. And God says, I did not take them on the way of the Philistines because it was a dangerous route. They weren't ready for battle, is what it says in Exodus chapter 17. So it says, so I took them in a roundabout way.
Yeah.
And so, their expectations weren't met. They thought that they were going to get to go, which is called the coastal highway. It goes right up. I mean, it's the most direct route from Egypt to Israel. It goes right along the Mediterranean Sea. It was the shortest route. It was the quickest route.
Yeah. You were just there recently.
Yeah. Right? I've been there a couple of times. And God, God says, I'm not going to take you on the easiest route or the shortest route. I'm going to take you in a roundabout way. And it seems like a punishment, but what He says in there, laced in that, is the secret sauce. It says, you aren't ready for battle.
Yeah.
What they didn't know is that the coastal highway, they called it the way of the Philistines because that's where the Philistines were. That's where they were camped.
Yeah.
And they had a blind spot because the very next verse says the Israelites left Egypt ready for battle.
Yeah.
So God just said you weren't ready for battle. And then they said, we're ready, so they come out of Egypt like, let's do this.
Yeah.
And sometimes, we think we're ready for leadership. We think we're ready for influence. We think we're ready for the next level.
Yeah.
And God's like, I love you too much to do that too soon.
Yeah.
But we live in a microwave generation. We want everything now. We want it Amazon. We order, it's there in 2 days. Everything we want, we get it now. But that's not God's kingdom. There's nothing in God's kingdom that is an instant gratification. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
So I would say, what everybody doesn't want to hear, they're like, turn this podcast crap off. I don't like this. Be patient, You don't kick down doors. If you have to kick down doors, I had a pastor ask me the other day, a pastor friend reached out to me and he said, hey, I've got, I want to build out a website and have myname.com and start, I really want to get out and start traveling and preaching more. How would you recommend I do that? And I'm like, I would recommend you don't do that.
Yeah.
That's what I would, if God's called you to do something, don't you think He's a big enough God to open the door when the timing's right?
Yeah.
So nobody's going to like that answer, but I would say patience is so important.
Yeah.
In that process.
Yeah. Because the patience of the process, you can do something very quick. I heard somebody say one time, when you're pouring concrete, you can try to rush things along, but all it's going to lead to is a broken foundation. That you can try to speed up the process, you can try to cut corners, but you can't. The things that are going to last, the things that are going to allow you to build upon them, are things that have to be steadfast, and they take time. And it takes time for it to cure. It takes time for it to mix. It takes time for it to settle. And if you do anything other than that, you're building your foundation, you're building your structure, you're building your future upon something that will crumble and fail you at the worst possible time. And that's what we don't realize, is that these moments that we think, oh my gosh, I'm trying to rush, I'm trying to get there, they are critical to building a foundation that will allow us to stand the test of time. Because one of the things, I guess people don't realize, and even myself included at times, is that you look at the levels of leadership you have, and the only thing that allows you to keep your sanity and to keep trusting God that He is doing something good and that He is moving is those foundations that you've had, and having time to allow those to cure, allow those to become not something you do and something you've heard, but instead become someone that you are. And I think that statement is huge, is that, when you can read a book once and you'll remember, I think 15% is what I've heard before. You'll read it and you'll pick the highlights out. If you read it and then write down chapters, you'll remember more, like 30%. If you read it, write it, and then repeat it back, you'll remember 70%. How is this any different? That if you allow it to take the time to settle in your heart, and you allow yourself to learn the lesson maybe once, maybe twice, then maybe walk somebody else through the process. It's not fast, but it's going to allow you to be steadfast in what you have learned. And again, I just reiterate that it's not something that you have done or a lesson that you have taught. It becomes who you are as a person. And when you allow those things to be foundational, and that's who you become internalized, and not something that you have done once, it allows you to stand up to those tests, kind of like you've talked about before in your life, where at the end of the day, multiple days in a row, you're left crying because you're like, oh my gosh, God, what is going on? Oh man, it's so good. Okay, we're going to go to break real quick. Listen, it has been so great having Pastor, Dr., President Jon Chasteen, just Jon as we call him here on the Legacy Podcast. It's been so great having him here. Hey, make sure you check out real quick. We love bringing you great content that truly impacts your life as we connect you to your passion for a purpose to create the God kind of fulfillment in your life. We'll be right back here on the Legacy Podcast. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks for watching the Legacy Podcast with your winning coach, Kinsley Jordan. Now, don't forget, you can subscribe right now just by hitting the logo right over there, and make sure you hit the bell so you get notified when new great content is available to you. Also, you can follow and keep up with me at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube by just going to Kinsley Jordan. That's my tag where you can find it. Also, if you're looking for a performance coach like me to be able to help you reach your goals, just go to www.kinsleyjordan.com and sign up. I'm right here to help you achieve your goals and build a legacy in your life. So let's get back to the Legacy Podcast with more great content right here. Hey, welcome back to the Legacy Podcast, again with your winning coach, Kinsley Jordan, as we have the honor and the privilege of talking to, and he's going to hate me for this, but Dr., President, and Pastor Jon Chasteen, as we just call him here. Jon, welcome back again to the Legacy Podcast as we took a little break. But even during the break, you were talking about not just the importance of the mentorship and really wrapping our perception of how we build our foundation that's going to allow us to move forward through these troubling times or challenging times, or prepare us for the long haul. Because, even the word talks about like run your race. This isn't a sprint. We're not trying to do the 100-meter dash. Like we have a life to live. We have gifts we've been given. We have passions in our heart. And a lot of times people can sprint for a year and then become burnt out. And I know we see this a lot in ministry, but we see this also in people that just have goals in their life. Kids come along and they say, I'm not going to go back for my master's, or, that dream's gone. That dream's dead. Nothing breaks my heart more than to hear believers say, well, that dream is gone. It is crushing to me to say, no, it's not. God put it there in your heart for a reason. Like, don't let go of it. If I was the enemy, that's exactly what I'd try to convince you to do, is stop believing that you can do it. So I want to take this time, the remainder time we have, to allow you to just, the lessons you've learned, if you could go back to, 22-year-old Jon Chasteen, or 22-year-old Kinsley Jordan, or whoever is listening today on the Legacy Podcast, whatever day this is that you're listening, what is the encouragement that you would be able to give, or what would you tell people to be able to anchor yourself for that long haul race, as you were kind of talking about?
Yeah, thank you. again, for having me. I don't know that I'm, have the wisest advice in the world, but I can certainly tell you some things that have helped me along the journey. And I'm 40 now, so it's not like I'm some great, gray-headed guy telling you how to live your life. I'm still trying to figure out my life too. So, but I think that's kind of the point, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think the key is realizing that we will never, quote unquote, arrive. I think we get this picture in our head of, well, once I can get these kids out of the house, and once I can get this debt paid off, and once I can get this title on my name badge, and once I finish college, then everything's going to be great. And I don't think that's the right mentality. I don't think it's the right way to approach, or we're going to spend our whole life waiting on perfection.
Yeah.
We were talking about the foundations a while ago. I used to live at my old house. My neighbor was a guy who traveled all over the country building foundations for skyscrapers. So he was from Georgia, but he would move somewhere for like 2 or 3 years and build the foundation. And he moved in across the street from me, and he was there to build the Devon Tower in Oklahoma City. Like, he was there for 2 or 3 years. He was the main guy. He was over the entire foundation of Devon Energy. And he was there for years. I mean, years.
Wow.
And I remember one day I was talking to him, and I was like, man, how does it feel to be the guy who is responsible for building something that no one will ever see? And he said, I don't look at it that way. He said, I look at it that anybody who ever looks upon the Devon Tower, the only reason they could look upon it was because of the foundation that I poured.
Wow.
And he, I get emotional even thinking about it, because it's such a powerful illustration of sometimes we want to be the tower that everybody looks at and like, wow, they've arrived. Wow, look at that. Oh my gosh, what a beautiful, what an amazing, what a powerful, what a wealthy person.
Yeah.
And the way that I view everything that I do is, what if what we're doing right now in 2020 has nothing to do with what's being built, that we're just building a foundation. Yeah. And the real purification of our hearts is to be able to say to God and to ourselves, if no one ever notices anything that I've ever done, am I okay with that? As long as if it's what God called me to do. And this purifies our hearts to never seek after the things for the wrong reasons. So I told at the university, I was meeting with our advancement fundraising department the other day. And we're a young university. We were founded by Jack Hayford in 1997. Yeah. And now we're a Gateway Church with Robert Morris serving under that church. The university is kind of a part of the church. And I said, and we're, close to 700 students. We're a great school. We're debt free. We got a lot of great things going for us. And I told the guy, I said, what if? I said, look at what we're doing. Let's say we're going to be at TKU for 5 years or 10 years. We have to look at this as 150 years from now. Who cares? Nobody's going to care about Jon Chasteen. No one's going to care about Kinsley. No one's going to care about most of us. But we were a part of pouring the foundation for which TKU is established on 150 years from now. And we may never see the day where TKU is as big as a massive university, but we're laying the foundations. How cool is this? And so I think, the advice for a lot of leaders is and we just live in such a social media world where we look, doesn't matter what industry you're in, on Sunday afternoon, we have a great church. We have a mega church. I pastor a mega church, and I'll go home thinking, oh man, what a great day. We have people saved and set free, and what a great day. And then I'll get on Instagram, and an hour later, I'm like, I'm a loser. I'm the worst pastor ever. Our church is doing nothing. We have no idea what we're doing. How stupid are we? We allow our minds to drift. Yeah. And social media can be a tool, but social media is such. I was talking to Craig Rochelle one month, my pastor mentor. I said, I just struggle through this. So, I'll see these pastors and all these, and his answer to me was, well, stop following them. And I was like, novel idea. It's not that those pastors are doing anything wrong. They're certainly not. I'm not mature enough yet. I have to be willing to say, I'm not ready for that. Yeah. And so I think what every leader has, the biggest enemy of every leader is the enemy in me. Wow. It's my insecurities. It's my
Yeah.
fears. What's my motivation? What's my why? Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's this purification um, of that foundation. What if I'm just meant to pour the foundation that I will never get to see
Yeah.
what it ends up being? So that's a big part of it.
That there's so much goodness there. That there's so much goodness you just talked about. I mean, so even just now, taking notes so I don't forget later of, oh my gosh, that was such a good statement. One of the things you said, mentioned about the foundation, like what does it feel like to build nothing, to build something nobody's going to see? And I'm reminded, even before I went to the Edmond campus working under you, there, Pastor Mike, a pastor who is, he was associate pastor at World Harvest Church, and I learned so much from him. And one of the things he said is, your job as a leader is to find people more talented than you and replace yourself with as fast as possible. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I these gifts that I feel like I've had are contrary to that. He said, no. Then they're not gifts. Then your downfall.
Yeah, and you would be stuck right there the rest of your life.
Completely.
Open new things. He's like, well, if that's all you want to do the rest of your life, then do that.
Yeah, because it wasn't until later, this process we're talking about, this curation process of allowing things to mature in your life and grow in your life. It wasn't until later that I realized, wait, do you realize you have more of an impact by being the person who cares more about others than you care about yourself and your own glory? Like when you become the person who is quicker to raise somebody else up, and it seems so small, but just for practical application, for us as a worship leader, it means that if you're the worship leader, it doesn't mean you need to lead every song. It means that you are spending time investing into the people who are more talented than you, and encouraging and teaching them how to do it so that you can hand off to them. And then you have not only replaced yourself and taken the whole team to a new level, but now you're able to step into different areas where now you can be utilized elsewhere to raise up a team there. And it really goes, have you read The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek by chance? Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't read that one. I love him though.
Simon, if you're listening, great shout out. Love everything you do, man. But he talks about the infinite game, and it's exactly what you were talking about. That so many people get focused. There's a difference between the finite game, which is like a football game. The point of the game is to score points and win. And people look at quote unquote success in their life, and they say, if I can just get here, then I've won, or I have arrived. And they neglect to see that life is an infinite game. That it is not about how fast you get to the finish line, because there is no finish line. And as leaders, if we look at the next event, because as pastors, you could look at Christmas and Easter and say, oh man, we got to get ready for Easter. You got to get ready for Christmas. But as I've heard so many times before, it's not about the event. It's about the process. And it's about realizing that it is an infinite game of which there is not a winning. There is simply staying in the game, which goes back to getting yourself founded and grounded such that when the winds come, when the storms blow, when the waves crash down, you are not crumbled and toppled over with nothing holding you up, but instead you're able to continue moving forward and having a mindset. And that's one of the things I loved about his book, The Infinite Game, is that it forces you as a leader to say, this is not about me or us winning or us getting to the end. It's about building a team that can stand the test of time and can grow and can encourage. And isn't that discipleship? Isn't that what we've been called to? I mean,
it's human nature, remember whenever the disciples came to Jesus and said, hey, when we get to our kingdom, who's going to have the best seat? We want to be seen, man. It's so common. We want to be seen. We want people to know we're there.
Yeah.
And Jesus rebuked him quick. And, I think inside every leader, we have to have this, I have a business card. I'm weird. I have two business cards. One says president of a university and one says lead pastor of a church. And while the written business cards may have that title, my heart always has to have the title interim president, interim lead pastor.
Yeah.
That I'm just here for a short time. And if I want the organization to outlive me, then I can't make the organization be wrapped around me.
Yeah.
Or it won't last.
Yeah.
I'm the interim. There's going to come a day, whether it's next week or a decade or 5 decades from now, I won't be there.
Yeah.
And that helps give perspective to this. Like you said, well, this is not about me, not
Yeah.
about me.
Yeah.
So,
One of I guess one of the questions that I think lends itself, because this is something I struggled with literally for a year before launching into a podcast, before launching into just helping people, because it wasn't until kind of in the innovation realm that the Lord really spoke those words to me of connecting people to the passion that He has given them for a purpose to live out that fulfillment that He has in their life. But I wrestled with this mindset of, I don't want to put myself out there. Like, why would I do that? It's not about me. It's not about what I have to say. It's about helping other people to do it. So what would you say? What is that step for encouraging people to, yes, step out and step into what God has called you to do, and do it in an unashamed way, do it in a bold way? But what are those protective barriers to make sure that it's not about you? It's not about the Jon Chasteen show. It's not about the Kinsley Jordan show. It's not, regardless of what social media or anything says. How do you make it so it's about what the value that you're bringing to this infinite game and this team?
One of my favorite verses is in Proverbs, where I think it's 16:9, that says, "Man plans his ways, but God directs his steps." And so what I love about that verse is an invitation to plan your ways. It's okay. Have a plan, have a goal for your life. That's a good thing. But then it's like, but God directs his steps. And so it's making this plan and then laying it at the foot of the cross, or at the foot of Christ, and saying, God, is this what you want me to do? And for me, one of the best lessons I've learned in the past couple of years is kind of how I got back into higher ed. So I finished my doctorate degree, and I'm lead pastoring. And, I didn't really even want to finish my doctorate degree because I fell in love with the local church. I mean,
Yeah.
just absolutely fell in love with pastoring. I want to do this the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But my wife was like, you need to finish your doctorate degree, because I had just put it to the side. I just ignored it for years. And I was like, why would I need to finish my doctorate degree? And she says, because you're not a quitter. That's why. And so I was like, okay, well, you got me. So I did.
You gotta love wives. They are always honest,
right?
always loving, always honest, hold you to it.
They just tell you the way it is. And
Yeah.
so I finished it, and God, so I defended my dissertation in August of 17. They mailed me my diploma spring of 18. Okay, so I get my diploma in the mail. I'm like, I don't even tell anybody. I don't tell the church. I don't tell anybody that I got a doctorate degree. I did it for me. But I still loved higher ed, and my doctorate is in university administration, to be the president of university.
Yeah.
So I get my diploma in the mail. The next week, Kinsley, Gateway Church calls me and says, we want you to come down here and be the president of TKU. And I said, what the church had walked through. So that 2014, I became the senior pastor.
Yeah.
2018, April 22nd, I know the date, 2018, Gateway called me and said, we want you to come down here and be the president of the university. And I said, I can't. I said, I'm flattered, but I can't leave this church. What we've been through, I can't abandon it.
Yeah.
And that's when Jimmy Evans, on the call, he said, I don't want you to. I want you to do both. And that's when my head exploded. I was like,
my gosh, what are you talking about? Nobody's done this.
Exploded. And so one thing that is really good, this is one of the best things I've learned. Sorry, my light almost fell over onto my face. That would have been devastating. One of the best things I've learned in the past couple of years was this. I went to work out with Craig. I'm telling him about the situation.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Craig, I don't know what to do. How could I do both? And I'll never forget what he said. He said, John, you've only met the God of or, not the God of and. And I said, what do you mean? He said, you think it's either or. You think everything's either or. Why have you never met the God of and? And there's always another and in you that you limit yourself to, that God's never limited you to, you've limited yourself to. And that's when he started going through this list of things. He said, John, and they may not be all Christians listeners on this podcast, but he said, I've got Life Church and YouVersion and the podcast.
Yeah.
He said, Chris Hodges has Church of the Highlands and the Ark and Highlands College. And then he really went to town. He said, think about the Apostle Paul. He had the Church of Philippi and the Church of Corinth and the Church of Ephesus.
Yeah.
So it was such a broadening of my faith and my vision to think, okay. And so what I've realized more than ever is that there was so much more leadership in me than I had ever begun to tap into.
Wow.
And it took stretching to tap into it. And so now if I were to go back to pastoring, I might be bored. And I'm not stressed. I'm not anxious. I'm loving both. God's grace is on it. And I don't know how much longer God's going to let me do it. But what it taught me, and I think your listeners could just allow God to stretch your faith. You may be thinking it's either this or this.
Yeah.
Either God's going to do this or he's going to do this. God may have a totally different plan for you, like he did for me. Like, I had no idea why I was going to be doing all this. And so part of it is just letting go and saying, God, I've got my plans, but I would rather do what you want me to do. And watch God roll things out that you could have never manipulated. Like, who could, like, if when I was 25, if I'd have said, here's my goal, I want to be the president of a university and I want to lead a mega church, and here's how I'm going to do it, here's my strategy, no one could make this crap up. So it's just almost relenting, and whatever you've written on the whiteboard of your life and your goals, somebody needs to just get an eraser and just erase it all and just say, all right, God, you just do whatever you want to do. And so God will always surprise us. He'll always, I'm waiting on the next surprise, I'm excited about what's next, whatever that is. And I'm not going to manipulate or force or control. God does something or he doesn't, So,
man, it's not very often I get left speechless. Yeah, you did it. If you know anybody who knows me, they're going to say, what? You were speechless? Seriously, because that is so good. You're right. He is not the God of or. He's far above, he's far surpassing any of our, where our mindset is or what we think is possible.
I ended up preaching a sermon on it the weekend that I announced. You can go back in the Victory Church archive. It's probably May of 2018, somewhere right around there. I preached a sermon called The God of And I preached this whole sermon about how we limit God. And then I ended that sermon by saying, and I need to announce my next and I was terrified. I was like, the church is going to throw tomatoes at me. They're going to egg me. They're going to, they standing ovation, man. They were proud of me. They loved it. So
wow.
It's just cool that God's given me the grace to do both of these things. I love higher ed and I love the local church, which confirms God will give us the desires of our heart. You know, if our heart is pure, if we're doing it out of a pure heart. So.
Oh my gosh, man. Jon, thank you so much for taking the time to pour into us, to invest in us. Because honestly, this has been an investment that is going to pay dividends for years to come. Because 10 minutes of this has been enough to be able to chew on for about 2 weeks.
Oh, I'm honored to do it, man. I don't know that I'm that smart, but I'm just letting God do some stuff in my life. So I appreciate you letting me come on.
You may not see it, but we definitely see it. You absolutely not only are smart, but it's the humbleness and the willingness to be able to say, yeah, absolutely. Like, it's the lessons. Revelation 12:11 reminds us that by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, and so many times we don't want to share our testimony for whatever reason. People don't want to share what God is doing in their life, whether it's a victory or whether it's a total and complete defeat. But how important is that? Because if you don't have both of those things that he said, then how do you get the victory? How are you able to, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony, we've overcome. It requires both of those, not only what Jesus is doing in our life, but the voice to declare that he is doing that in our life. It's huge. Oh, man, thank you so much. We are so proud of you. So excited to follow what you continue to do, not only at Victory, not only as a president there at the King's University, but also just as a mentor to the Legacy podcast and just sharing the wisdom that you have. So thank you so much again. We look forward to hearing your podcast tonight. Is that going to be on your channel, on your Facebook channel?
It's actually going to be on the Victory Church Facebook page.
Yeah. Awesome. Talking about racism and how we approach that mentality is going to be great. We'll make sure we put the link in the comments. So Pastor, Doctor, what did I forget? President Jon Chasteen, thank you so much, Mister. Thanks so much for being with us. Hey, thanks for tuning into the Legacy Podcast. Again, we are devoted to connecting you not only to the passion that God has placed in your life, but for the purpose that he's called you to make sure that you are living that fulfillment that he has called you to in your life. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell to get the notifications so you can hear more great content of the leaders that we surround ourselves with, like Jon Chasteen and so many of our friends. So thank you. We'll see you next time, and thanks for tuning in to Legacy.